If you're working on a Kotlin multi-platform project with multiple modules, you've probably noticed a lot of duplicated Gradle code. Every build.gradle file seems to repeat the same plugins, dependencies and configurations. Not only is this messy, but it makes updates a nightmare. In this video, I'll show you how to clean this up with custom Gradle convention plugins so you can write cleaner, but more importantly, more maintainable build scripts. So we're going to be using convention plugins. Functionally, they're exactly the same as a plugin you'd see here. The only difference is that it's going to be scoped just to our project. It's not going to be something that's published to a repository for other projects to use. So we'll start by creating a directory at the root level, and we'll name this build-logic, and within that we'll create another directory named conventions. So this is where all of our convention plugins are going to go. Now we need to go to our settings.gradle and include this build logic, and for that we can use include build and simply type build logic. Now within here we need to add its own settings.gradle file. So that'll be settings.gradle.kts, and within that we're going to just want to copy the plugin management and dependency resolution management block from our root project settings Gradle. We'll copy that and we can sync. And after that's synced, we can go into the new settings.gradle file and we'll add a new module in here. So this is conventions. This is what this folder is here. So within inside this conventions folder, we'll add a build.gradle.kts and we'll resync. Now we should have access to this plugins block. We can use this. Now you'll need to use backtick here, followed by Kotlin DSL, and all this is going to allow us to do is write our Gradle build scripts in Kotlin. So we'll sync again. Once that's synced, the last thing we need to do is add a directory at source/main/Kotlin with inside here. Now this is where all of our convention plugins will go. So if we start by going into our domain modules, let's go into the game domain module. We can start here. So in an ideal world, what we'd like to be able to do is, instead of including all of this, so everything that's duplicated within each module within domain, so you can see this is just duplicated, we'd like to be able to just use something from our TOML file in the plugins that we've created. So for example, Kotlin.domain module. So we need to start by creating this. So we'll go to our TOML file. That's found in the Gradle folder. Now at the bottom, we'll just add a comment here. We'll just say custom Gradle plugins. And here we can add Kotlin-domain module. Now this needs an ID. And for that we'll just use our package name, cvk.domain.module. Now that's all we need here. So as you can see, that's getting picked up. So at the moment this isn't really linking to anything. We need to register our plugin, and we can do that within our build.gradle file of the conventions module. So within here we can say Gradle plugin and plugins, and we should now have access to a register function. So we'll name this domain module. Now we need to give it an ID and an implementation class. So we'll start by creating the implementation class. We just do that within our Kotlin folder here. I'm going to call this domain module convention plugin. Now this needs to implement plugin, and we'll give it a type of project. We need to implement the interface apply. We'll just leave this as it is at the moment. And now we can just pass the name of this class in as a string. The next step is to pass the ID. So if we go back to the toml file, this is the ID here. Now we can't directly access the toml file from inside of here yet. If we try to type libs, we can see it doesn't exist. So what we need to do is go back to this settings.gradle file. So this is the new one we've created. And within here, we'll add a new version catalog. So we'll use version catalogs create, and we can name it libs. And we'll say from files. Now we'll go up a level. So if you think we're at this settings.gradle now, we're going up one level, which will take us to the root. And then into the Gradle folder, and then into our libs.versions.toml. So we'll try to sync this. It will probably fail, because of this ID. But you'll now notice, well, it hasn't quite picked it up, but it should exist now. So we'll be able to say libs.plugins.domain module. Sorry, it's .kotlin.main module, which is what we've created here. And as you can see, that's picked up. Now, if we try to sync this, we can see that there's a type mismatch. So this libs that we're using here just only uses strings. So what we're getting here is a provider of the plugin dependency. We need to say .get.plugin ID, and that should get the actual ID from here. Unfortunately, we can't use libs in the same way you would in a normal build.gradle file. So we'll try to sync that. And yep, this is just our operation not yet implemented, which is what we've done here. So we'll remove the to do and try again. And it's successfully synced and applied the plugin. Obviously it's empty at the moment, so it's not doing anything. So one more thing we'll do before we start implementing these convention plugins. We want to be able to access libs from here. So to do that, we'll create an extension function from this project class. So we'll call it project extensions. This will just be a file. And within here, say fun project.getLibs, and this will return a version catalog. And we can use extensions, which comes from project.findByType. Now this will be version catalogs extension. And we can call named and libs. So this is searching for our version catalog with the name libs. This is what we've created here. Now this is nullable because this might not exist within the findByType, or it might not be able to find the libs file. In the case of this, we'll just throw an error. We'll just say version catalog libs not found. So that's everything we need to access libs within the convention plugins. So now we could say target.getLibs, and from here we can find all of our plugins from the toml file. So now we'll actually include what we need in this convention plugin. So if we go back to one of our domain module build.gradle files, we can see that they're all using the Kotlin Multiplatform plugin. So that's what we'll start by adding. So within here, we're going to say the function equals with target. Now I'm going to explicitly declare the return type as unit so that it matches what's needed for the plugin interface. And all this width is doing, if I type this here, you'll see that we're at the scope as the project. So what we can type in here now is just very similar. Say if I want to use path, it's very similar to if we're inside the build.gradle here. It's the same project that we have access to, apart from within here it's using a project delegate, but we have access to all of the same properties. So we'll start by getting a reference to our libs, and we can do that using the getLibs extension function that we've created. Now we need to apply the Kotlin Multiplatform plugin, so for that we'll use plugins.apply, and we can use our libs.findPlugin. Now unfortunately, as far as I can tell, this needs to be accessed by a string, just with the way that we're creating the version catalog within the settings.gradle. So from here we'll use Kotlin Multiplatform. If we go into our TOML file and scroll down to the plugins, this is what that's referencing. Now from here, similar to the issue we had within the build.gradle, we have to use get and then use the plugin ID. So here we'll say get, and then in fact we have to use .get and then plugin ID. Next we want to actually configure this plugin. So if we look back in this build.gradle file, this is what we want to configure for any project that's using this Kotlin Multiplatform. So I'm just going to copy this and put it into here. Now this won't work where it is. We need a block as if we're configuring this plugin. So for that we can use extensions. This is extensions.configure, and we can give it the type of Kotlin Multiplatform extension. We don't have access to this at the moment, so this needs adding as a dependency in our build.gradle. So we'll add our dependencies up here. Now we don't want to use implementation here. We can just use compile only, because this is a dependency that's only needed at compile time. It's not needed at runtime. And this is going to be the Kotlin Gradle plugin. So within here we'll access libs.kotlin.gradle.plugin. Now this isn't actually declared in our TOML file at the moment, so we'll go back to our TOML file. Now I'll just go to add it here. We'll call it Kotlin-Gradle-plugin module. This is coming from org.jetbrains.kotlin-gradle-plugin. And the version for this, we're going to use our Kotlin version. So we'll come back here and sync this, and it's failed to sync because we've left all of this in, but that's fine, because we should now be able to, okay, maybe we can't import it yet, we need to allow it to actually sync first. So we'll just comment this out first and try again. And now that that's managed to sync, we'll uncomment that, and as you can see we can now import this. So once that's imported, this should allow us to open the code block here. And now from here we can just copy that directly in and paste this code. Now one thing you might have noticed, this is using the name domain game, which we obviously don't want because that's just for one specific module. So what we'll do is go back into project extensions and we'll create another extension function, or this will be an extension property. We'll say val project.module name, and we'll use get here, and we can say path.split, So what this path is going to do, I'll just put a comment here so it's maybe easier to see. In our case of the main game, it's going to equal :domain game. Now what we want to do is turn that into this. So to start, we'll split with a delimiter of a colon. So that's going to give us a list of an empty string from the start, followed by domain, followed by game. So we'll first filter out everything that is not blank. Filter out everything that is blank, so we're left with only strings that aren't blank. Now we can then use join to string with a separator of nothing. I just want to put them directly together, and within here we want to capitalize the string. So this is the transformation that happens for each part of the list that's being joined to the string. So it should result in this turning into that. So we'll go back to the convention plugin, and then from within here we can just use module name. So now if we go back to the build.gradle file for the domain game module, we should be able to just remove this altogether, and we can also remove this block here. So I'm just going to sync and just check that everything still works and we haven't missed anything out. So it's managed to sync successfully, and we'll just run the project. As you can see, it all still seems to run fine. So what we'll do is we'll go to our other domain module and we'll do exactly the same thing. So this is now going to use Kotlin.domain module. We can get rid of this. The domain settings name should be picked up automatically. We can sync that and it should all work. So the next step will be to create a plugin for our data modules. So we'll start off by just making a copy of our domain module convention plugin. We'll name this data module convention plugin. Now we'll just leave this how it is for now. And within the build.gradle file, we need to register it. I'm just going to copy this here and change this to data module, this to data module, and reference the correct convention plugin class, which is this one. Now we need to go into our toml file and declare it here. And for this we'll just change that to .data.module, and that should be everything we need. So we can sync that. So our next step is to jump into a data module. We'll just go into core and we'll have a look at what's actually being used. So as you can see, this is using Kotlin Multiplatform 2, as will every module in this project. So this is what we've included in our domain module convention plugin. Now we also have an Android target being set. So this is actually coming from the Kotlin Multiplatform plugin, and it needs to be set when you're using either Android library or Android application. Now the other thing we're setting in here is this whole Android block. Now that's coming from Android library. So the first thing we're going to need to do is add the dependency to the Android Gradle plugin. So again, we'll use compile only libs.android.gradle.plugin, and we need to declare this in the same way we declared the Kotlin plugin. This will equal module. Now this is going to be com.android.tools.build, and then the name is Gradle. And for this we want to use our version of the Android Gradle project. So this should be version.ref, and we should have our version up here. So we go back to build.gradle, we can sync that. And now when we go into the data module convention plugin, we should be able to apply it. So we'll use libs.find plugin, and this is named Android library. And again we'll use get plugin ID. Now from here, we'll similarly to here, we'll use extensions.configure, and we should have access to library extension. So this is coming from com.android.build.gradle. Now within here, this scope is essentially the same as what you'd see in here. So from this, we can just directly copy this and paste it into here. Now you'll notice a few things that don't work off the bat that we'll have to slightly change. The first thing we'll do is fix this, because this is specifically for the core module. All we need to do here is replace this with path. Sorry, not path, name. And all name will do is give you the name of this module directly, ignoring every folder above it. Now to get the compile SDK and the min SDK version from the libs, we have to use libs.find version, and again pass it in as a string. So it's this here, android.compile SDK, and here we'll use .get, and we can use required version in this case, and then cast it to an integer. So I'll paste that there, and we'll do exactly the same for the min SDK, obviously remembering to change compile SDK to min SDK, and I believe that should be everything we need. If we go back to our module, we need to include this Android target as well, so we'll copy that, and this needs pasting into the Kotlin Multiplatform extension part here. If we come back in here and get rid of these two, and we'll replace it with our Kotlin.data module, and now we can get rid of all of this and all of this. We'll remove the imports and we'll sync, and we'll run, make sure it still works. Yep, everything seems to compile fine. So now we'll do exactly the same for the other data modules. We'll just swap this out for Kotlin.data module. Delete all of this and delete the Android block from the bottom. Remove the imports, and the last one is settings. So now we'll sync, and everything should still be working correctly. Now, before we move on to doing the same thing for our feature modules, you might have noticed that we're duplicating this section within our data module convention plugin and our domain module convention plugin. What we're going to do is extract that out into a separate plugin, and we'll call this Kotlin Multiplatform convention plugin. So now any module that uses Kotlin Multiplatform, which is in our case every module, is going to apply this plugin. So again, this needs to implement plugin project. And we're just going to do exactly the same what we've done in the other projects. We'll say with target. Now what we can do, the domain module, this is actually exactly what we need. So we're just going to copy this and paste that into here. Now our domain module convention plugin is identical to the Kotlin Multiplatform one. I'm going to leave it in because I just personally think it's a bit more clear if we just see that it's coming from the domain module. And if we need to add anything later on, that's fine. We can just add it directly to our domain module. So inside of here, instead of coming from this Kotlin Multiplatform plugin, we're just going to use our own. I'm going to call this Kotlin.Kotlin Multiplatform. So we can get rid of this part. Now we need to register this. So we'll start by going to the TOML file. I'm going to add this at the top of this section. Kotlin.Multiplatform. Now we need to register this. So it's exactly the same way as we've done here. I'm going to put this at the top. Just give it a name of Kotlin Multiplatform. And reference the class. And sync, and everything should now be set up. So now what we can do is go back into our data module convention plugin. We can change this to our own, which will be Kotlin.Kotlin Multiplatform. Now this is already included, so we now don't need that, but we need to include our Android target, and that should be good to go. So I'm just going to run this. As you can see, it's all working correctly. Now we'll take a look at what's in our feature modules. So we can see we've got Kotlin Multiplatform, Android library, Compose Multiplatform, the Compose compiler, and Kotlin serialization. Now you might have noticed this is using Android library similar to our data modules. So we're going to do exactly the same as what we've just done here with the Kotlin Multiplatform convention, but for the Android library. So we'll create a new Kotlin class named Android library convention plugin. Now I'm going to go into data and just take this directly for now. So all we're doing, need to use with target. Give it the explicit type. We'll delete this. This is all we care about, that it's using Android library. And we can take this whole block and paste it here. Now this isn't going to be quite right because we're going to end up with data for our feature modules or anything else that uses Android library. So what we'll do is go back to our extension functions. We'll just copy this module name and we're going to call this module package name. And what we want here, so if you remember, the path might be feature settings. We want to turn this into feature.settings. So we're going to do something pretty similar to what we did here. So use a delimiter of colon with split, filter out everything that is blank. So we're only taking the ones that are not blank. Now when we use join to string, we're going to use a dot as a separator, and we don't want to capitalize it. We actually want this to be lowercase as it's part of the package. It should be lowercase anyway, but we'll just use this. So we'll go back into the Android library, get rid of this data section, and here we'll use module package name. So we're going to register this module just like we've done with the others. Be named Android library. We'll reference the right class, and we'll go back to our TOML and add it here. This will be .android.library, and we'll sync that. While that's syncing, we'll go back into our data module convention plugin, because we can now remove this whole section, and we can just change this to use our Kotlin.Android library plugin instead. So there's a few imports we can clear up. And we'll just run to make sure everything's working correctly. So hopefully you can start to see how these plugins are being built. So we've got plugins to match, our types of modules that we have here. And if we look into those, they're just then splitting out into using external plugins, so Kotlin Multiplatform, Android library. So all this really means is that on our end, we can just have one nice plugin here that's just handling everything for us. So now we'll create the feature plugin. I'm just going to make a copy of the data plugin for now. Change this to feature. And we'll open one of the feature module build.gradle for reference. So I'm going to make a copy of this just so we can see what we actually need. So Kotlin Multiplatform is handled by this, Android library is handled by that. Now Compose Multiplatform and the Compose compiler, we don't actually have any different configurations within the build.gradle, so we don't need to do anything with these. So we'll still remove them from here. Well, not yet, but they will be removed because we're going to replace it with our feature module plugin. But we don't need to create our own version like this. All we need to do is access it directly and say Compose Multiplatform, Compose compiler, and in fact the same with the serialization. So we can paste that into there. Now one thing we need to do is go to the project root build.gradle, because we haven't added the serialization here. So we'll add that, make sure it is apply false, and sync. So this should now have everything we need. So we need to register the module, the plugin, sorry. We'll call this feature module. Change this to feature module, just the same what we've done with all the others. Reference the class, declare it within our TOML file, change the ID, sync, and we should now be able to reference it. So we'll go back into our feature modules build.gradle, and now we can just directly access plugins.kotlin.feature module. Get rid of all of these, all of that, and the Android block, and sync. And we're just going to do the same for the other three feature modules. Now one thing here, this feature module is using compose.resources because we need to generate the resources class to be able to access our strings and other resources. I'm just going to copy this. This shouldn't actually be in the Android block. It's not needed inside the Android block. It's separate. I'm just going to paste this down here when we get rid of this, because this is something we're going to need to declare on the module itself. So I've made the changes to all of the feature modules. So I'm just going to sync and run again just to make sure that everything's fine. Yep, it all still works. Now, one other thing we can do, if we notice in all of the feature modules, they're all using Kotlin X.serialization. Now, we can move this into our feature module plugin, so we'll do that. We go into here. Within the Kotlin Multiplatform extension, we have access to source sets. So from in here we can use configure each and we can check the name. We could say when this is common main, we'll use a dependencies block, and then within here we can add our common main dependencies. So what we want is this. I'm going to copy it. Similar to up here, we can't access the libraries directly. We need to do it by string. So here we'll use find library Kotlin X .serialization .get sorry, I think just .get. No, we need .get. Now within the feature modules, we'll just remove this line. That's removed from all of them. You can sync. Now, since coin is ingrained through this whole project, we can find it in every module. I'm going to actually copy this dependency into our Kotlin Multiplatform convention plugin. So similarly to what we've just done, we'll use source sets, configure each, where name is common main. This will be libs.find library coin.core.get. So now we can remove this from every single module. And lastly, we're going to add our coin compose bundle. So this just has everything we need for coin to do with compose and view models and the navigation. We're going to add this to our feature module convention plugin. I'll just copy the name of that. Now, I can't figure out a way to, you can use libs.find plugin. Find bundle. I can't find a way to directly put this bundle into the implementation function. The only way I've found to be able to do it, let's just get the name, is to use find bundle. So here will be coin.compose and then get and then for each, and within here we get the module dependency. So we can then use implementation and pass it in like this. But that's in there, so we'll remove this line from all of our feature modules. We can also remove this serialization because that's added in the convention plugin. And we'll sync. So we still have two modules left to look at. We'll start with our UI core module. Now, This is a bit of a one-of-a-kind module, so there's no point creating a separate convention plugin for it. But what we can do is in here, just access our Kotlin Multiplatform, and the same for our Android library. So this doesn't have its own, UI module convention plugin, but it still allows us to get rid of this and the Android block. And similarly, we'll go into our compose app build.gradle. This again is a one-of-a-kind module. We'll do exactly the same. Kotlin Multiplatform. Now this is an Android application, so this is different to the Android library. So we're still going to need to keep all of this in this file. That's because it has extra information such as the application ID, target SDK, and the version code and version name. But since we've changed this, we can get rid of this small section. So that should be everything set up now. And now it means if we create a new data module, for example, all we need to do is apply this plugin and it's all set up. All we need is to add any dependencies that we need specific to that module. And if we want to change something about the setup for the data module, we can just do that within our data module convention plugin. So it's now just nicely in one place. I just want to give a big thanks to GreatTusk for their pull request on Gradle plugins. This has saved me a lot of time and contributed to a good portion of the code you've seen today. If you'd like to see the code that they did, I'll leave a link to the pull request in the description, as there's other valuable parts within this. If there are any topics you'd like to see covered, just please let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Make sure to subscribe and star the repository if you've liked this. Thanks for watching.